It's your weekly breakaway for fun conversations on pro cycling and so much more. Join us as we go beyond the slipstream. I'm Matt Harper, and together with my brother Justin, we'll do deep-ish dives on bike races, movies, bands, and all manner of shiny pop cultural objects. Oh, and did I mention bike races? We're kind of obsessed. Allez!
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Slipstream. I'm Matt and this is my brother Justin, and today in our first segment we'll have a conversation about Tadej Pogacar and whether or not his utter dominance of the men's side of pro cycling in 2024 was and is good for the sport. In our second segment we'll review The Last Rider, a Hulu documentary about the life and career of Greg LeMond, the first American man to win the Tour de France. And lastly, we'll continue with our ongoing series on HBO's The Wire as we dig into season 2 of this incredible crime procedural set in Baltimore, Maryland. Allez! The dominance of Tadej Pogacar in 2024 has been nothing short of breathtaking, with dozens of wins in huge races, including the historic triple of the Giro d'Italia, the Tour de France, and the World Championship road race. Pog cemented his already rock-solid place in the history of men's pro cycling. It's an incredible story to be sure, but in the moment, it left us with some pretty boring viewing for some of the biggest races in 2024. Is this kind of dominance good for the sport? Let's get into it. My overall opinion, yes, he is good for cycling. He is good for the sport, and there are a few reasons. What is your overall thought, and why don't you dig into some of your reasons?
So I probably feel like I changed my mind a little bit as I did research, because my history with cycling is a lot shorter than yours and most people that have been into this for a long time. So as I was looking at, who won what over the last, since 2010, one of the things that I start to realize is that dominance in cycling is kind of a thing. It happens pretty regularly, or at least over the history of cycling, at least in the last 40, 50 years, you've had these moments where, there is utter dominance in the sport, and it's happened multiple times. You had it with Lance, you had it with Ineos, and Froome, and with Ineos, instead of it just being an individual, dominance, it was a team dominance, because those guys, they won. They had 3 different riders win, Tour de France's over the course of 5 or 6 years. 4 different riders.
Yeah, they had Wiggins, Froome, Thomas, and Bernal.
Right. Wiggins. I forget about Wiggins. Yeah. So, and then you go back to, Eddie Merckx, and it's something that has consistently popped up over the years in cycling. And I don't know, I can't say that it's a bad thing, because anytime you have greatness happen, all eyes are on greatness. Greatness brings people to, brings eyeballs to what's going on.
Yeah, and there was also, prior to Lance Armstrong, there was the Miguel Indurain era of I think it was like the early 90s maybe, and he won like five straight Tours de France or something like that. So, yeah, it is kind of a thing where you have these luminary riders. Now, I think Pog stands atop all of those guys you just mentioned, obviously with the exception of Eddie Merckx, who's still in the conversation. Pog does not have Merckx's palmares yet, although I don't know that Merckx ever won the treble like Pog did this year. But he's become this cross-disciplinary rider that is as capable of winning one-day classics as he is Grand Tours, which is pretty stunning. I think the first reason I would say is that he's good for the sport overall, is kind of what you said. Greatness draws eyeballs. His ascendancy and his dominance is a giant storyline, and people who are thinking, just getting into the sport, or wondering if this is an interesting thing, can attach themselves to him, and have a good in to get them into viewing the sport. He will be, his legend will live large, and the accomplishments that he's done will be things that people talk about for decades. That sort of lasting effect, I think, is a net positive. Compare it to somebody like a Michael Jordan, like an absolute, luminary of the sport. I mean,
I feel like I would compare it more to like a Tiger Woods.
Okay, or maybe a Steph Curry or something like that. I mean, I actually Steph Curry would be a good comparison because Steph kind of changed the sport, and I think Pogacar is doing the same thing. Like he, becoming this cross-disciplinary guy who is going out for all kinds of different stuff. I mean, young guys, guys who are in their teens right now, guys who are 12 years old right now, who are going to be the next big stars. They're watching that kind of racing now and thinking, okay, that's what I need to be aspiring to. Just like, Steph Curry was this guy who just took 5 million 3-point shots, between the ages of 10 and 18 or something like that, and changed the sport by making it much more 3-point focused. And, subsequently, what have we seen? Every team has got 2 or 3 guys that can just bang trays all day long. Look at how it's bled into the women's side, the ascendancy of Caitlin Clark. I mean, this girl is just knocking down logo threes, and she's not the only one. I mean, the women all over the place are knocking down logo threes as well. You can trace that whole through line back to Steph Curry, in my opinion, and how he changed the sport. And I think Pogacar in a way is no different,
Like I said, I think that you have any time in sport where you have somebody that is rising above and beyond the rest. I don't know. Like I said, I root. I've said it once. I'll say it 1,000 times. I root for greatness, and I think it's fun to watch. I think you're right. It does take a little bit of the punch out of these big races when you're kind of like they're a foregone conclusion. But I think over time that will dissipate. I mean, I think the guy is at the absolute peak of his, fitness and his condition right now. And I think that we'll probably see this for a while this way, but then, we just also don't know. We don't know if this year was a fluke because of the accident in the Basque Country. All right, we don't know. And I'm not saying that it was a fluke. The guy is amazing. But would he have won everything had more of those riders been healthy come the time of the Giro and the Tour? Like, it makes a big difference. He was not involved in that wreck. There's something to be said about that. So, I mean, there's no doubt that the guy's legacy is just getting, cemented with every, passing race. His stats alone are just out of control. But, does all of will the winning create complacency? Will he continue to, it seems like he just seems to be getting stronger. Will being at the very top, will he get fat and happy? Not, figuratively speaking, I doubt he'll ever be fat.
I can't see him losing his desire to win. I was listening to a podcast with Juan Antonio Flecha, and he was quoting some luminary athlete from the past who said something along the lines of it's hard to rise and grind when you sleep in silk sheets. But I don't know. I don't clock Pog as that kind of guy. He seems to absolutely just love being on his bike and love winning and hunting for wins. There's two sides of the coin. Will he continue to dominate? Yeah, very possible. But at some point he's going to peak and other guys are going to start nipping at the heels, and that will be interesting to watch. It will be interesting 5 years from now when he is let's say, not necessarily the most dominant guy, then we're going to have some really tight competition, and his history and all of his wins and his palmares will play into that. Like, can the old lion roar again? We're going to get all those kinds of storylines.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, there's going to be his chasing of titles and bolstering his palmares. I mean, that's going to be an entire like a multi-season storyline moving forward. Will he be chasing Cavs record? Will he get all 5 monuments? Will he win every single possible like 1 week stage race? Like he seems like a guy who is interested in just crossing every single thing off the list,
being a completist.
Yeah, and that's fun to watch. I'll sign in for that. I mean, the question becomes like, are there people out there that are going to be like, what, to hell with cycling, I'm done with it because I'm tired of watching, this guy just wins every race and so it's boring. I mean, maybe there's some people that feel that way and kind of watch less, but in the end, like, I don't know that we lose a lot of fans because of one dominant rider.
I would posit that it hasn't hurt tennis over the last 20 years to essentially, if you're a fan of tennis, then you've just and you've been watching tennis for the last 20 years, you've probably just lived through the greatest time of competitive tennis with, kind of 3 of the, top men's tennis players that will probably ever play the game that all kind of were in the same era. And
that's a different question though. You're talking about 3 guys versus 1.
Yeah, but you also have Jonas. I mean, look, like I said, you have this one guy, and we all focus on this one guy because he won everything, last year. But we forget that he lost 2 tours in a row. All right, this guy that was seemingly untouchable. Well, he got touched. You know what I mean? He hasn't won. He hasn't only beat. There have been losses, and big ones. So I think it's a good thing for the sport whenever, especially if there's going. I love the Primoz, Jonas, Tadej kind of storylines. I like these big teams, and Remco too. I like to see them mix it up because I think those guys have the potentiality to beat him. I don't think he's unbeatable.
Yeah, and I think I mean, I don't know. It was very exciting going into the tour this year with like the big 4 as it was, and nobody necessarily could have seen it playing out the way it did with this one guy just being totally dominant. In 2025, I don't know that the storyline, will be quite like that. I mean, I don't see Primoz winning the Tour de France like in his career. It's possible, but I don't see that happening. I don't think, especially given Remco's injury, that he is really going to be challenging. However, I really feel like we're going to see like a big rematch of Jonas and Pog, and in a way that story is almost more compelling because it seems more possible. You know what I mean? I mean, Jonas after that injury last year. Jonas still was one of the only guys to beat Pog heads up last year. It was an amazing stage. He was
the only one that could hang with him. I mean, he still came in second place. I mean,
right.
these guys have essentially traded blows for 4 years. They each have 2 seconds and 2 firsts in the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And and Jonas has the extra motivation of it. It's like in Tour de France wins, it's now 3-2, and so that's a good. Jonas is going to want to tie that up, and that just means the following year it's going to be great, man. We're going to have another tiebreaker. I mean, so that that is definitely keeping things interesting, to be sure. It's just evolving in a different way. So. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be plenty of good Grand Tour racing.
And I think you're right. I think about Primoz. I think that you're probably right. I think that he probably doesn't win the Tour. But I will say that if there was ever a year for it, it has to be this year. I mean, like, obviously time is not on his side, but it seems like that team is building for a win now win now situation, not a win later situation. So, the news of seeing him like definitely being in the Giro was, I don't know, I guess a little. I don't know if that's like a. I don't know. I don't know what to think about him being in the Giro. So, and you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to see, but I don't know, man. I do like watching him race, man. I don't like when he does the like 80K breakaways, but when he's mixing it up, like I definitely
Watching who? Watching who? Primos or Pog?
No, Tadej. So,
yeah, I mean, he is exciting. Like anticipating when he's going to make that move and everything. It's just like it's the foregone conclusion of the next 60 Ks that that nobody's going to be catching him. Yeah, there's 20 really exciting seconds when everybody's deciding whether or not they're going to try to go with them and watching that. But yeah, as we discussed that last week. I mean, just being able to say, yeah, I was there, I witnessed it and everything, that counts for something. Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up there, and we are going to be back in just a few with our second segment on the wonderful Greg LeMond. Stay tuned. For a long time, Greg LeMond was the most famous American professional cyclist, having become the first American man to win the Tour de France back in 1986. The Hulu documentary The Last Rider chronicles his life and career with lots of insights delivered by the man himself. Justin, what did you think of this movie?
I thought it was beautiful, and I loved the dynamic between him and his wife. I love how in love with each other they are.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. I thought it was a really neat insight into how hard it is to live a life and be a professional cyclist at the same time, and what it does to your family and what it does to your relationships, and it's amazing how, they can get through, so many hardships. It's just so, there's just like so much and still come through and win the biggest race in the world. So it's really, really, really touching.
It's so great that family element emerges as the real story of the documentary. But within that, you've got the story that, the Le Mans v Fignon and the Tour de France story. And let's not forget, Delgado. Was it Delgado? Yeah, let's not forget him, because having him on there as a talking head as well is so nice. It's so great that he's in there, giving his insight alongside Le Mans. But the story of what happens and the odyssey that family goes through and the redemption at the end is just so delicious. But let me start by saying that I really want to do a segment on Le Mans on this show first, because if you're an American and you're talking cycling, at some point the L word is coming up, whether you like it or not. And you know what? I want Greg LeMond to be the first guy that we do a real segment on this show about, because he was there all along. That's what I want to say. It's like our American cycling hero. He was there all along, and he is unstained, and he is cool. And to this day, he is still advocating for the most important thing in cycling, which is its legitimacy. It's clean, fair legitimacy. And he's been ride or die for that cause since basically day one. I just love the guy.
You can see it in his eyes. You can see it in his eyes when he talks about, riding clean. That he really means it, and that he advocates for it. And I don't know. I mean, I think that's the great thing about cycling right now, is that it seems that they've gotten over the hump of all of this, and that the testing is working, and you know it it's he, but you're right. I mean, he is so pure and honest in his direction. Really, really, great guy, and what a rider. I mean, what a athlete to be able to kind of not realize you wanted to be a cyclist, and be like, oh, I'm good at this, and then conquer the world.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the athleticism is incredible. I mean, but in terms of his advocacy, as I was talking about, like, not only has he literally like a week ago made a headline because he's calling for like full transparency for, I think, VO-max and what is it? The other one, hematocrit and VO2 max numbers he thinks should be like fully published and available for every single rider in the peloton, like at all times. And that's awesome. But then go back. Who was the guy that got Floyd Landis to come forward? It was Greg LeMond. I love that. He was back there like, look, Floyd, you're in the hot seat right now, buddy. You can save cycling right now if you come out. If because you're going to lose your Tour de France. You got a Tour de France and you're going to lose it. But if you really love this sport, you need to do this thing. LeMond was there. LeMond gets him to do it. You know what I mean? And knowing like that, yeah, this sport is going to take a blow, but it has to have this. We have to have this crucible in order to get to the next side. And now we're there. What a absolute contribution, and that it's coming from this just pure American man. That's fantastic.
Yeah, he's an absolute legend. How about him getting shot, man? That's like, talk about a wild thing to come back. We talk about all these these crashes that these guys have had, and then like them coming back from it, and it's like Greg LeMond was almost killed. You know what I mean? He was almost killed by a shotgun blast, and not only did he come back from it, he came back and won a Tour de France.
Oh, I mean, the nuance of the story, you couldn't write it. If you know what I mean? It's like life will just always give you the more incredible story if you let it. I mean, he wins his first Tour de France, but it's which you would think would be the big one. It's the first time an American won the Tour de France. The first American. He becomes like this major first that no one can ever take away from him. He's Neil Armstrong walking on the moon in the cycling world. And yet it was totally unsatisfying to him. He had this terrible time where, the press was hounding him, and like just all this, he hadn't come out yet with his, with his big admission about having been sexually abused as a child, and all of that was just ruining it for him. And of course, nobody knows that. And then he gets shot, and it adds this other like major, atomic bomb in the middle of the story. And will he live? Okay. Will he ever ride a bike again? Okay. Will he be a pro cyclist again? Okay. Will he be really good again? Okay. Will he win the Tour de France again? It just like keeps getting bigger and bigger. The story. It's so good. And then
and then he beats another French hero.
Yes. Who's won 2 tours already, but is such a great villain for the story. He's like just such a prick. He's so easy to just like hate, and yet he even gets a little humanity at the end. And then speaking of that, the real like the gesture at the end where, oh, this film's dedicated to Laurent Fignon. Like, boom, right there. I'm just like, come on, Greg, you can do no wrong, Greg. Of course, it's dedicated to Fignon. Like, incredible.
How about the when his wife was talking about how Bernard what's sorry, I always want to pronounce it wrong. Was like helping her, after all of the bad will that had happened, before. And like, it's hysterical. It's hysterical that this American rider beat, these two like French, like beloved French riders, like in different, like, kind of years apart. But that, even with, if you saw Slaying the Badger, that there's a 30 for 30, on Hulu or Disney Plus. Maybe.
No, it's not. It's not available anywhere.
Really?
Slaying the Badger is not available anywhere. Believe me, I looked this week.
Oh, really? I don't know. Anyway, whatever. There was such a rivalry there, and then to hear her be like, "Oh, of all the people to pull me through the crowd, it was Bernie Hinault," and like the full circle of that. I mean, and again, it's what makes cycling so great. But it's, I love the fact that that's an American at the center of that, and of course, French people hate Americans. We beat them,
Oh, let's examine the Bernard Hinault arc within the Greg LeMond story. Okay, so it's like first LeMond gets his contract, he goes to Europe. Who's there being super cool to him? Bernard Hinault, welcome into the team. He's like, "Hey, buddy, you're going to help me win the Tour de France. Welcome. And like, I'm looking forward to great things. And if you need anything, I got you. Just, hit me on my cell." And what does LeMond do? He helps him win, right? And it's like, that's so great. Hinault gets his win, and now LeMond is poised because he does so well in helping Bernard Hinault that like the handwriting's kind of on the wall. So Hinault says, "You know what, buddy? You did such a great job. I'm going to help you this year." And then he zags, and like he becomes this villain. He's a double-crossing, dirty Frenchman. You know what I mean? You're hating him. And then at the end, he's back on their side, and he's like, "Man, let me get you through this crowd and get you to Greg because I'm right there with you again." And it's like he gets redeemed in the end, and yet at the same time, you're wondering to yourself, or does he just want to be next to the winner and like get himself into the press? It's just like so juicy, so great. And that's just like one little thread of the story. And you could not write it better. Like, what an incredible story. And I look back about how like into the Lance story I got and how I was so wrapped up in that. Oh, it's the greatest story ever. And I'm like, nah, this LeMond story, a million times better than the Lance Armstrong story, especially with what we know now. But even if you compare the two side by side as they were happening, the LeMond story is so much better. I mean, the familial redemption arc is the best part of the entire thing. The fact that like his cousin tried to kill himself because he was so distraught over having, shot him. And the way that both Greg and Kathy talk in the end about how they could just see it in their cousins, the relief after he won that tour, and they were like can you imagine the weight that was lifted off their shoulders? It's just like I mean, I had tears coming down my eyes.
Yeah, it's a really amazing story, and it's a great chapter. And I think the reason why it stays evergreen is that it's pure. There's a purity to that story because, surely there was lots of controversy around all of it at all times back then. But we now know on this side of it that, he's a great guy and he is exactly what he said he was. And,
all along, he's been an absolute rock.
Yeah.
All right. We need to wrap this up, but I want to just do a couple of quick hits on a couple of the points that I wrote down for myself. One thing, the look of this film in terms of like, I can't get enough of vintage cycling, photography, videography, so many great shots in this thing. LeMond looks so good on the bike when he was younger. He was just like, he had that build, he was one of those guys that, in certain photos he'd look skinny, but in other ones he just looked like Diesel. I just love that about him. He spoke French so great when you see him like first Tour de France, they hit him with some question in French and he's just like right there answering in French. I'm like, hell yeah, this guy's like 19 years old and he's already got his French going. And like, I was loving that about him. Some of the actual like clothing worn in this thing was nuts. Like the black suits with the white pinstripes at the team presentation. You remember that? Oh my God, that was so funny. And then you got Laurent Fignon with his like sleeveless jersey that he's out on his training run. It's fucking sleeveless. Oh God. The kit when Lamond is like out training in the winter and he's like wearing that Renault Elf kit, that the black and white, and it's all like thick. You can see how thick all this stuff. It looks like so cumbersome. He's got this giant hat on. So good. All right, what else? The fact that you got Phil Liggett in the Anthony McCrossan role in this movie, where you're constantly hearing Phil, and there's lots of Paul Sherwood in there. That was before you got into it, but I've talked before about how Phil had this old partner, Paul Sherwin, and that's the other voice that you hear talking with Phil, and at least one point for each of them, you hear Paul say Phil, and you hear Phil say Paul, which I love, because I love that guy. May he rest in peace. Yeah, I could go on and on. There's so many great points, little details that came up in that movie. But if you got anything else, take it away, and we'll leave it there.
No, my big thing would be if you want more like this, look up Slaying the Badger. It sucks that there isn't anywhere for us to link it out to people, because that one is also very, very good. That is like the much more telling of the first half of this story from this movie.
I couldn't agree more. I remember loving that when I did see it. Yeah, the Badger is the perfect nickname for Bernard Hinault. When you see the look on his face at the '84 tour, like when he moved over to La Vie Claire, and he's on the podium, and after when was it when Lamond? Yeah, no wait, oh no. What did I say? Oh, and then you got Lamond in the white jersey over his shoulder, giant smile on his face, like, don't worry, I'll be winning this thing soon enough. I mean, Eno is just like not looking happy. Anyways, yeah, the Badger. All right, let's leave it there, and we will be back in a few. Stay with us. For our last segment today, we're continuing with round 2 of our ongoing discussion of HBO's The Wire, the gritty crime procedural TV series that has become widely regarded as one of the best TV series of all time. You said last week that season 2 is your favorite. Why?
So I'll start by saying that when I first watched it, it was absolutely not my favorite season. I didn't like how far of a departure it went from the first season, as far as where the focus was with the A story, and I didn't get it. And it takes a while in the second season to like bring it all together, because obviously the first season kind of splits everybody up, and it takes 4 or 5 episodes before it's really back to clicking, but after watching it multiple times, it becomes my favorite season because of, again, it's what makes The Wire so great. It's the characters and the play of these guys on the docks is so good. I mean, it's such a great capture of the blue collar worker and the plight of it, and what the real stress and triggers are for these guys as the world was moving on. I mean, it's this, again, I'll say that what's so great about The Wire is it's this last breath of the analog age. It's in the first season, you have the pagers, leading in payphones, and that's going to eventually lead later seasons into cell phones. And then, you have these dock workers that their jobs are being automated and essentially eliminated. And, now they're trying to struggle and make money, and they've got to turn to crime. And it's sad. It's sad that is a reality for people in this position. And The Wire does such a great job of showcasing that and making you really, really feel it. And, the characters are just amazing.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point when you said that at first it wasn't your favorite season. I think for most people that watch this show, the hard left turn that the show makes right at the beginning of season 2 is jarring. But in a way, to me, it's kind of genius because it really breaks your understanding of what this show is and is going to be. Ultimately, it breaks it out of what you thought, and you start to realize the real emergent themes of the overall series, which, as I spoke about last week, is a look at institutions and organizations and how they interact with each other. And they have all of these other themes that go along, which I think what you were just talking about, the theme of the blue collar worker, these themes run through each of these institutions that they look at. Like teachers are blue collar workers, cops are blue collar workers, dock workers are blue collar, and drug dealers, exactly, and drug dealers, and politicians aren't, but that's the other side of the institution. You get to see the higher ups as well, and in each of these different kinds of organizations, you get to see full breadth of the organizational structure to the bottom, and it's just fascinating parallels that run between each of these organizations.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think that there's really great comedic elements in this. I think that you have this great comedy tragedy with Sabatka's son, Ziggy. I think the tragedy of the Sabatka family is really compelling in this season. I think that Frank Sabatka is a great character.
So good.
Just a guy that has the weight of the world on him and just wants to do the right thing and is trying to do the right thing by all these people. And he gets to that very last part, and he makes the decision to do the right thing, and but it's too late. He's got himself in too deep, and he ends up losing his life, and his son ends up essentially losing his life, and it's all it's such a tragic end for that family. And what's funny is they have that last scene in that last episode where they're kind of like showing off again where everybody's going. They have that scene where Nicky is on the fence, and he's got his kind of hands like in the fence, like looking through, like out, and it's like he's in jail too. You know what I mean? It's like he didn't really escape. Like he got out, and he made his deal, but he's in his own prison. And like The Wire does such a great job of like that imagery and making you feel so in that moment. And man, God, I love this season.
So on this on the Sabatka thing, like what's great about him, and it's the same thing with nearly every character in the entire show, is basically everything you just described would paint a picture of a very like noble, hardworking, valiant character. But let's not forget, there's a whole lot about that guy to dislike. And you definitely ride this roller coaster with that character, being like, what a piece of shit. But then like at the same time, like man, this poor guy, in a show that can make you feel those two conflicting emotions, not just about him, who's a pretty character, but about damn near every character in the entire show. There's no Greg LeMond on The Wire. That's for sure.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, there's some you like more than others.
Maybe Lester Freeman.
Yeah, maybe Lester. I don't know. I feel like he can even be a prick in a way. But yeah, that's another. The characters. I mean, they also fleshed out. They're also real. So believable. There's no Superman.
Yeah, and the way it's again, I think it's cool how one of my favorite elements of the show is how the police side of it starts to use technology to their advantage in trying to stay one step ahead of these criminal organizations. And then I also think it's cool how the criminal organizations realize that they're on to these certain things. You know what I mean? And then they're like, okay, now it's time to change. So, but I love the show for so many
that technological element of it. It's something that I really didn't even think about, but I love that you're bringing it up because, I mean, the name of the show is The Wire. Like, it literally references the technology in the title of the show. So it makes like a really cool through line, watching how things change over time.
Yeah, it really is. It's like it's watching now. I mean, now with our iPhones and our laptops and our all of this stuff that we now take for granted. It's interesting to watch a show 20 years on and be like, wow, this is the last. This show is in the last breath of that analog age of discs and CDs and tapes and beepers and nobody had cell phones and there was payphones, and so it's weird to see it, but it's also kind of neat to watch. It's amazing because of the time that it's in. You're watching it change throughout these 5 seasons. You're seeing the technology change and shift, and it's neat that The Wire captured that moment in time because like I said, now everything is so, we're all so jaded with our computer phones.
Yeah, the constraints that the technology puts on the plot of the show makes it very interesting because of the specificity of the technology that they had, what it was and wasn't capable. And you could go back 20 years before that show, in that time period, and you would have similar things. What was the technology like in the 50s and 60s? I mean, all we had was landline telephones. So all of that is interesting. I feel like as we have entered this sort of modern era that we're in now, I heard a lot of people talking over the years, past 10 years, let's say, about how they can do everything. You can do anything now, and people just text, and it's going to ruin the screenplays and stuff. But I just think it just creates a different constraint that is part of writing. And you've seen a lot of TV shows and movies integrate that kind of technology in very interesting ways, where you're getting to see, people texting each other, and it just kind of pops up on screen. And we've reached a point where it doesn't seem jarring anymore to see that pop up. It just is a natural part of a movie that there might be some text that pops up on the screen of characters texting back and forth. And the technology of the video production, the graphical displays have become so good that the ways that they integrate these things into movies and TV shows becomes it's artistry in and of itself.
And it feels natural. I mean, it's like looking over someone's shoulder and reading a text. I mean, it's essentially the same thing, and they make a good they do a good job of doing that. One thing I do want to say about this season that I thought was so cool is I loved how they interplayed, even though they introduced this entire new operation, they also still interplayed with the original kind of guys, and they're also spreading that Baltimore web with Prop Joe, and how the Barksdale organization is keeping that keeping it going. I think it really will play into more stuff to come in our talks to in the future. But I just I think The Wire did such a good job, and I didn't see it the first time, of still connecting that tissue so that it comes back to play later on. Like, even though you'll
Oh, I
take,
was just going to say that.
yeah, it's
Like
it's really,
the interconnectivity is incredible.
yeah, it's
The way that McNulty ends up in the boat, but then McNulty is the one who finds the body, and so he is now invested in this side story. You know what I mean? In a way, so you got that like little tendril there, and then things are starting to branch out further. So now we get a little taste of the Prop Joe world. So we're seeing Baltimore expand at the same time. We're also seeing East Coast expansion with one of the best parts of the whole series, of the whole season, which is the Brother Mouzone plot line. And now New York is in on it. So we're starting to establish this connection to this larger network outside of Baltimore. And I mean, talk about a great choice for a counterpoint to the Omar Little is Brother Mouzone. You know, you got Omar, this like street tough with a scar on his face that's just like this gay dude, you know, that's this crazy badass. And then who is, you know, set in opposition to him? Brother Mouzone, this like super straight-laced Nation of Islam, you know, traditionalist, clean cut, like he's just the diametrical opposite of Omar, and yet, you know, just as deadly, just as fearful. I mean, what a great character, that whole thing. And the writing around that whole relationship, and the way that Prop Joe's involved, the way that Stringer Bell is involved, with all those guys, is so good.
Well, and then, you know, and you know, it goes back to that, like, you know, it's all kind of blue collar. You have, you know, Stringer trying to keep their business together and wanting to make decisions that will be good for the business, but, you know, it's, you know, you know, it maybe lose you a little, you know, respect in the street. And it's like, you know, you have the other side of the power who, you know, that's in prison. That's like, you know, you can't do anything right now. You can't help the situation. And it's like, you know, I don't really care about your ego. Like, we need to be able to make money. And the way that like Stringer has to make a business decision about this drug thing. And, you know, on the other side, you have his boss being like, you know, fuck that shit. I don't want to lose street credibility. You know, it's very funny that you know, that you have that struggle and how that plays out, and how Stringer does a masterful job of like kind of putting Avon where he wants him to be.
Well, yeah, but it's funny also too, though, that like the show is going to show us in the end that like maybe Stringer didn't, you know, he didn't see the picture large enough, and perhaps Avon Barksdale like was more grounded in reality. Again, that's just like one of those things about the show that's just so good is you know, there is no black and white on The Wire. Like, it is 1,000 shades of gray. Well, we could get into a whole lot more about that one, but we are gonna put a pin in it there, unless there was anything else you wanted to
I'm
mention.
good. With each passing one of these, I'm like, I get to the end of the conversation, and I'm like, oh, I'm ready to talk about the next part of the story. So yeah, I'm good to wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this. I, you know, wish that podcasting was just my full-time career, so that I was watching each season as we were doing these weekly conversations. But that will I'll have to save that for another life. I could definitely rewatch the entire show instead of just catch recaps. But it's really fun talking about it, and I'm looking forward to continuing it. All right, when we get back, we are going to take a little ride in the Broom Wagon. Stay tuned. All right, we're back, and we're taking a ride in the Broom Wagon. I'm going to go first. And for my segment this week, I am going to, for the parents out there who are listening, recommend, if at all possible, getting your kids interested in doing swim team. I have, in the past year, become a swim parent. My kids joined the swim team at the local pool that we go to, and it has been such an incredibly positive experience for our family. You know, at the base level, it's fitness, and I like to see my kids engaged in something that is healthy and good for them and good for their bodies. The team aspect of it, excuse me, is fantastic as well. It's a unique team sport in a way because not only is it co-ed, so you've got boys and girls on the same team with each other. Very unique. I mean, just about any other team sport that they're out there, all the ball sports and stuff, they're going to be with a group of 10 girls. And that's who you're going to be hanging out with all season long. But when your kid's on the swim team, it's not just a group of 10 girls that are the exact same age. It's little girls, middle girls, older girls, little boys, middle boys, older boys. It's a wide variety. And I witnessed a couple of beautiful moments last year where one of my daughters was getting on the block and getting ready to swim her heat. And I saw an older kid come through and give her a little advice, motivation before she jumped in. And I just thought it was wonderful seeing like a big kid, helping out the little kid like that. Very unique. That's not going to happen if your kid's playing soccer. There's 9 other 12-year-olds on the team. So a big recommendation. And now it's led to some interesting stuff for me. Being a parent, you very quickly learn that you're going to be a volunteer because every swim meet needs multiple volunteers to do all kinds of stuff. And I have fallen into the role of the announcer for the kids swim team, a role which I love. And it's now led to some outside announcing gigs for swim meets. I just did one last weekend, and that was a whole lot of fun too. So a big recommendation to get your kids into swimming. All right, what do you got?
So I was like racking my brain about something, and I just have a quick recommendation. So one of my favorite things every year, it starts in November, is I'm a history buff and I love the History Channel, but I am obsessed with The Curse of Oak Island. I don't know if you've ever heard of this television show.
Oh, you've talked about it. Many.
So I'm throwing this out as my recommendation. I think it is very, very cool. I feel like they are kind of rewriting North American history right now, and I think it is really, really interesting. Not the treasure hunt part of it is really my least interested part of it, but they have unearthed a structure there that the dates just keep kind of pushing back, and I just think it's really interesting. If you're interested in history, you do not need to go back and watch any of the plethora of previous seasons, because they will just inundate you with recaps all the way along. You can just pick it up right where it's at. But if you're into history and especially American history, North American history, it is very, very interesting. History Channel is 9:00 on Tuesdays. So that is all I have, my friend.
That's cool how you said you can just like pick it up midstream, and they do a good enough job of like show to show, like filling you in on what's happening. That certainly makes it more appealing.
You could just jump in, because because obviously it's a lot of filler. They do a good job of showing you what they've unearthed in relation to the thing that they're doing at the time. And, you don't get it all, because there is an absolute ton of it, but what's poignant to what they're doing right then, they give you the backstory on around it very, very well.
Give us a 1 minute summary of some more, like what this show is about, like where is it located, who are the people, and what is it?
Oak Island is it's a tiny island in Nova Scotia in Mahone Bay, and for the last essentially 150 years, people have been searching for a supposed treasure on the island, because there's been evidence and people have searched and found a lot of mysterious stuff in the ground on this tiny little island in Nova Scotia. Some passionate people have gotten involved, especially recently, in more or less the business of trying to find this supposed treasure. And they are doing a lot of work up on this island every year. Most recently, they have uncovered two things that mesmerize me. Is if you go back one or two seasons, they had unearthed a stone road that is very similar in design to things that you find in Portugal from around the same time, which is just it's earthwork. I mean, it's like it's works. It's structural, works on this tiny island in the middle of nowhere. And what intrigues me is all of this stuff is there. Someone put it all there, and that takes. How much stuff is there does not happen by accident. It is not small. There was something obviously went on there, because for all of this to happen, there had to be a lot of resource and, manpower and,
And there's no like history book on this, like that, like
no, nobody knows anything about it. And they've uncovered this stone road. Now, a couple years later, on the opposite side of the island, they are uncovering what seemingly is like some sort of staging ground where or a barracks, or, some sort of area where, people were being housed. And what's really crazy about it is that they buried everything. It's not like it just dilapidated and it went fallow. This stuff was buried. Okay. So all of this stuff happened. All of this
what
stuff
time
happened.
period are we talking about?
So
you said it was like the same stuff in Portugal at the same time.
They're dating the stone road back to, possibly as early as the, pre-Columbian, like 1400s, 1500s.
Holy crap.
They have found evidence. They have found trace evidence of things on one part of the island, like on the surface, and at 180 feet in depth, like literal matching, soil samples. There's a whole lot of history to it, but it's all over the island. There's stuff there's structure that has been buried, and there's all of these different. Like I said, there's a lot to it. But to me, what's interesting is the fact that why here there's so much evidence. They found Roman coins. They found
are there legitimate scientific organizations out there doing this research, or is it it's absolutely professional. They have archaeologists. They have metallurgists. They've got scientists that are doing XRF stuff. There's just a lot. They're digging. And they're actively trying to find the treasure. Right now, that side of the story, which, if you're interested in the treasure hunt side of it, is, they've been drilling holes in this area that they call the Money Pit for years. And there was a shaft that they refurbished last year that once they got down to the level where they wanted, all of a sudden the shaft started filling with water, and they kind of stopped doing it because it was late in the year. And that's been the problem, that anytime anybody ever digs down into this area, it fills with water. And supposedly there are flood tunnels, right? Like booby traps to prevent people from finding whatever it is. As they've been drilling these holes, though, they leave, they're, probably big around. They leave the hole there. They've been taking water samples from down in these holes, and they are finding, gold and silver in the water, and it's not naturally occurring. All right. Wow.
So the science speaks to it that it is there. So
I'm sold. I will watch it after I watch all of Saturday Night Live and somehow Chasing the Badger. Slaying the Badger.
No,
Sounds good.
We'll watch an episode together or something, and that way I can give you some running commentary along with it. So, but yeah, no, it's again Tuesday night's History Channel. It's very interesting. It's goofy. They never find anything. So I mean, they find tons of stuff that's very interesting. If you like history, you gotta want to like history and find it interesting when they find a barter token from the 1400s on an island in Nova Scotia for no reason that it shouldn't be there.
Gotcha. That is all for this week. Join us next week as we look at some end-of-the-year storylines from the men's and women's pro peloton ahead of the 2025 season. We'll also have the first of a two-part conversation on Lance Armstrong, taking a look at his career and story prior to his retirement from pro cycling. Lastly, we're going to continue with our series on HBO's The Wire with Season 3. Until then, for my brother Justin, I'm Matt Harper. Thanks for joining us on another ride beyond the slipstream. Ale!
Beyond the Slipstream is a production of Harperama. Find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please like and subscribe, smash that button, leave a 5-star review, and most importantly, tell all your friends about us. Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time. Ale!